Hey, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Good. It's good to have you here with us on this Sunday morning. Thanks for being here. And as Vanessa just said, if you're brand new, make sure you stop by our Next Step table. They have some great crumble cookies, and we'd love to give those to you for free. Don't fake like this is your first time here. This really has to be your first time here, okay? But we hope you'll stop by there. Last week was Easter, and we had an amazing time here at The Journey. I want to share a few numbers with you, some celebrations from last week. The first one, and I think maybe my favorite, is we had 11 people that were baptized, which was just incredible to watch and to see and to be a part of that as they were taking this big step in their spiritual journey. But there's a couple other numbers I want to share with you. One, I'm just going to go ahead and disappoint you, okay? I will not be eating Peeps on stage today. If you're new, you're like, what are you talking about? A few weeks back, I made a little bet with our Journey crowd. I said, hey, if we beat our record of attendance from last year, I will sit up here and eat a Dr. Pepper Peep, because we all know that those are terrible and taste like styrofoam, right? Well, we didn't get there, but we were close. We had 974 people last Sunday. I think most of them were here during the 10 o'clock service. If you were here for that one, it was a little jam-packed in here. But thank you for inviting your friends to come, your ones to come. It was great to meet so many new people. But didn't quite get that record, but we were close. The other one I want to share with you is our Easter offering. We had a goal of $30,000 last week. We give away our Easter offering, and we give it away to things that we do for outreach or missions within our church, in our community, and with our global partners. And we did pretty good. Okay, here's the number from last week. $59,000. Yeah. Pretty amazing. So thank you for your generosity. Yes, we are going to give a little extra to some of these organizations that we are working with because you guys did an amazing job. In fact, we're like, hey, we need to up the ante on our Christmas and Easter offerings because we seem to be going past them pretty well. But thank you for your generosity and giving to that. But Easter was fun. Easter was great. And again, just appreciate you being a part of that if you were here. Okay? I love this kind of stuff. I love data. I love studies. I love research, numbers. And those are good ones. I want to share with you a few that are maybe not as good. Listen to some of these statistics. About 30 years ago, almost 50% of Americans attended church on average of 3.5 times per month, okay? Today, about 10% of Americans actually attend church 3.5 times per month. Regular attenders today is 1.5 times per month. So if you show up 1.5 times per month, you are called a regular attender in the church world. And only about 30% of Americans actually attend on that regular basis, 1.5 times per month. Okay? That's the church world. Well, what about God? What are the statistics on God? Here's what we find. Only about 54% of Americans are certain there's a God. That's down 20% from 2007. Okay, now a few more people believe that there may be a God or there's just a higher power, but about 54% of Americans are certain that there's a God. 35% of Americans have entirely changed their faith from the faith they grew up in. 60% of Americans have no faith or are unaffiliated with any group, right? They're part of the nones, which is about 30% of the 60%. It means they don't believe in God, don't believe in this higher power. The other 30% are people like, hey, maybe there's a God, maybe not. I kind of would say I'm a Christian, but I don't attend church or don't really care that much. So about 60% have no faith or are unaffiliated with any religious group. And then for those of you that are Gen Z, that's our 18 to 29-year-olds in here, 26% of your generation are former Christians who have left their faith. I find these statistics pretty interesting because I think they tell a story here that people aren't just walking away from church, but people are walking away from God and faith. Now, there are many reasons for this, and we can spend some time talking through that. But one of the biggest reasons we find that people have stepped away from God, stepped away from faith, stepped away from the church is because many people feel like they've been burned by God, or they've been burned by the church, or maybe they've been burned by Christians. And some of you that are here today, that's your story, right? Then maybe you've come back to church, you're trying church out again because you felt burned by God. You felt burned by the church. You felt burned by Christians. And God didn't heal you, and the church hurt you, or Christians disappointed you at some point. And those experiences, they don't help us when it comes to faith. And so over these next 3 weeks, we're going to spend time talking about these 3 topics. We're going to talk about being burned by God, burned by the church, and burned by Christians. But we're not just talking about this just to say, hey, there's a problem. We want to talk about this and say, hey, not only are there some struggles that we have, but healing can come if we really are focused on what that looks like for us. And so this morning, as we start this series, I want to talk about those of us who feel like we have been burned by God. I'm assuming that there are a few of us in this space who would say that we feel that we feel like we've been burned by God. That prayer went unanswered. That broken relationship was never mended by God. Maybe there was an unexplainable loss of someone you love. And because God didn't jump in, God didn't meet your expectations. We talked about the expectations a little bit last week. You're struggling with this connection with God. You're struggling with this relationship with God. Again, let me tell you this. You can be rest assured there are other people in this space today that have been there. There are other people in this space today that are there right now. But even if we look at Scripture, we find the exact same thing. We find in Scripture there are quite a few people who had these experiences that felt burned by God. And I want to spend some time this morning walking through one of those experiences. In the book of Matthew, we're going to spend most of our time there today. Matthew chapter 11, starting with verse 1. Here's what it says. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" Let me give you a little background here about what's taking place. We have John and Jesus. They're actually family members. John and Jesus are cousins. John has a role to play. His role is really to roll out the red carpet for Jesus. He's letting people know, hey, the Messiah, the anointed one, is coming, and you need to be prepared for him. So this is what John's job is. But as we read this first part, what do we find? There's a detail here, right? He's in prison. Now, why is he in prison? Well, John told the king, King Herod, that he was sinning. Now, what was this sin? King Herod was having an affair with his brother's wife, his sister-in-law. Well, he ends up marrying his sister-in-law. John says, hey, you're not supposed to do this. The king gets mad, arrests John, and puts him into prison. If we look at this passage, okay, here he is in prison. He asks Jesus this question. Look at that question. Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? Sounds like a pretty simple question to answer, doesn't it? Scholars say that Jesus actually is answering 3 questions that John is asking, or John's asking 3 questions. Here are those 3 questions in this one little statement. First one is, are you the promised leader that the Old Testament prophecies told us about? Second question is, if so, what actions are you going to take in that role? And then the third question is, because if you are, can you bust me out of this joint, right? I'm not going to ask how many of you have ever been in prison before, okay? But I want to use this as an example and keep it kind of simple. Have you ever seen the flashing blue lights in your rearview mirror when you've been driving? Like, what's the first thing you do? Let's just be honest. We're in church. First thing you do is probably curse, okay? I know some of you. That's probably the first step you do. But the second thing is you start praying, right? And your prayer is probably something like this. Hey, dear God, please let the police officer be really, really nice and kind and not needing to meet a quota today, right? It's probably the prayer that we pray. But when the officer gives you a ticket, who do you get mad at? Probably the officer a little bit. Do you ever get mad at yourself? No. You're not like, self, why did I get a ticket today? You don't say things like that. Sometimes, who do we get mad at? We get mad at God. And so we'll kind of yell at God, hey, God, you could have got me out of this. Why didn't you do that? Hey, God, I didn't need this today. Why did you let this happen? Hey, God, why didn't you jump in and save me? Now, again, compared to what John's asking, my example here is very simplistic. But here's my point. This is how many of us believe God should work in our lives, right? When I need God the most and I ask God for help, my expectation is that God will jump in and take care of it. What happens if that's our philosophy and God doesn't jump in? What do you do when that engagement finger remains bare? What do you do when that baby crib is still empty? What do you do when mom's not sitting at her chair there at the dinner table anymore? What do you do when you haven't talked to your dad in years? What do you do when that application is still unanswered? What do you do when those bills keep piling up? And what do you do when those times come in life? Our response is usually something like this. Hey, God, where are you? God, are you real? God, can you help me through this? Or, God, should I go look somewhere else for answers to these questions? And so when God doesn't answer the way we want, or probably the way that we expect God to answer, for us, like that God's not worth believing in. Think about John. John probably thinks he has more work to do for Jesus. He feels like, hey, my job's not over. Jesus is here. I got more work to do, but there's an issue. He's stuck in prison. And he's asking Jesus through this simple question, hey, Jesus, look, I've been rolling out the red carpet for you. I've been setting people up for you. I got things ready. Remember, we're family. So just kind of wondering, when are you going to get me out of prison? Here was Jesus' response in verse 4. Jesus replied, go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Here's John who's sitting in this dark, probably stinky cell. Okay? Now what he's done, he sent his disciples to Jesus to ask this question. So his disciples have come back with their answers from Jesus. And Jesus starts to go through this list. Now, John knows these words. And the reason he knows these words is because he knows the prophecies that these are attached to. He knows these words are coming out of the book of Isaiah. And so when he hears this, he hears the blind see. He's like, yeah, this is good. This is what Jesus came to do. That's what Isaiah had prophesied. Hey, the lame walk. Man, this is excellent stuff, Jesus. The dead are raised. Yeah. And here it comes, right? Here it comes. And he keeps waiting for the next line. And the next line is the prisoners are set free. And Jesus doesn't say a word about prisoners being set free. He leaves John there in that dark prison. But John knows he's the Messiah. John knows he's the Savior of the world. But he's not the Messiah he expected because he's not getting him out of prison. He's not saving him from prison. And I think that's the moment John realizes he's not getting help. That John realizes he's going to be stuck there in that prison and things aren't going to get better for him. I can imagine John feels burned by his cousin, right? Jesus. But I bet he also feels burned by God. I'm pretty sure he knows he's been left there to die. But look at what Jesus says about him a little bit further down in verse 11. It says, truly I tell you, among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Yet whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. I love this because here's Jesus who's saying, hey, John's a great dude. In fact, he's the best of the best. And even with that, even with Jesus acknowledging that, he doesn't show up to save John. God doesn't call some audible to rescue John from prison, to keep John alive. But then we look at John and we're like, but he's doing exactly what God has called him to do. He's living the life that God wants him to live. He's setting the stage for Jesus to come, and yet he's left in prison, which, by the way, if you don't know the story, not too long after this, he's actually executed. He's beheaded for someone's fun. I don't know about you, but I read this story and I think to myself, this doesn't seem fair at all. Like, this isn't how God should function. Because in our minds, we are thinking, hey, John got burned by God. But maybe the reality is a little bit different. That God doesn't play by our rules. I want to take a moment and kind of walk through a couple of Christian myths that are out there, because I think the reason we may feel burned by God is that we don't always understand these ideas that we believe in, or we don't really fully understand how God works in this. And so I want to take a moment to walk through these. Some of these you've probably heard before. Some of these you've probably said before. Some of these you may even believe yourself. And if you do, this would probably lead you to feeling burned by God. So let me share these two Christian myths with you. Here's Christian myth number one. If I'm a good person, God will take care of me. Sociologist Christian Smith wrote a book back in 2005 called Soul Searching: The Religious and Spiritual Lives of American Teenagers. Now, in this book, he coined this particular phrase, moralistic therapeutic deism, okay? Now, he said this was the belief system of teenagers then. That's 2005. Some of you were teenagers in 2005, okay? What does that make you now? An adult, right? You're doing adult things. So you probably still believe some of what Christian Smith is talking about. In fact, I would say there are many Americans specifically who believe in this idea of moralistic therapeutic deism. Now, what's the idea behind this? What is he saying? He's saying this. The moralistic piece is, hey, I just got to be a good person. Like, that's what my life is all about. I just need to be a good person. The therapeutic part of this is I just need to feel good about myself. I need to be a good person, and I need to feel good about myself. The deism piece is that God exists but stays out of your life unless needed. Essentially, he's saying God exists to help me be happy and to solve my problems. And so maybe for us, we hear that and we're like, okay, so here's my life. If I don't cuss too much, if I don't drink too much, if I don't sin too much, if I'm a good person, that God will take care of me, right? My marriage is going to be great. My dating relationships are going to be awesome. My credit score is going to be 800, right? If I do these things and if I'm a good person, God will take care of me. And I'm going to say this again. I believe this is what a lot of people believe today, especially in the Christian world. How do we respond when things get tough? How do we respond when things don't go our way? When God doesn't heal the cancer? When God doesn't prevent the sickness? When God doesn't get us pregnant? When God doesn't fix our finances? When God doesn't fill in the blank, whatever that thing may be for you? When God doesn't do what we expect God to do, how do you and I respond? Well, if we think God exists to make us happy and to solve our problems, and God doesn't, we probably end up feeling burned by God. We probably end up feeling let down by God because God didn't meet my expectations. See, if we go back to the story that we're reading in Matthew, Jesus says, John is the best of the best. He's a really, really good dude. He's doing God's work, and yet God still doesn't rescue him from prison. But look at verse 6. Jesus says something really powerful. God blesses those who do not turn away because of me. Jesus says this statement kind of cryptically after he tells John, like, hey, God's not going to save you. And so these words are actually meant to be an encouragement to John. Like, John, I know things are hard right now. I know you're hurting. I know you're suffering. I know you want out. But don't give up, right? Don't give up on me. Stay focused on Jesus. And by the way, if you read this, it says, if you do these things, you'll be blessed. Now, based on John's story, I don't think John experiences those blessings here on his life on earth. I'm pretty sure he experienced it in the life to come. But when it comes to God, it's not about you and I being good enough. And if we're good enough, God will take care of us. I think God's saying, hey, when those tough times come, when life is hard, when those tensions are there, stay focused on me. Stay strong. Continue to do everything you can to follow Jesus. And if you do that, right, you will be blessed. Maybe not in this life, hopefully in this life, but in the life to come. That God will bless us when we don't fall away because of what God didn't do. And yet some of us struggle with that particular myth. But I honestly think that one rolls into this second myth that maybe you've heard before. God will never give you more than you can handle. This is kind of an oldie but a goodie in the Christian world, right? Maybe some of you have said this before or you've heard this before. It sounds really good. And if you look at it, it kind of seems theological, but it's actually pretty far from the truth. The issue with this one is that it gets mixed up with a teaching of Paul. Paul was not a follower of Jesus. Jesus meets him on this road to Damascus, changes his life. Paul becomes a pastor, becomes a church planter, planting churches all throughout the Middle East and parts of Asia. And so he writes letters back to these churches that he started, or he writes letters to groups of Christians in these particular areas, and we have some of those recorded in the New Testament. But one of those is to a church in Corinth. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, this is actually one of the churches that Paul planted, chapter 10, verse 13, we read this: God will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. Notice what that does not say. It does not say God will never give you more than you can handle, right? Look at that one more time on the screen. God will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. Paul is talking about temptation. This myth that gets used quite a bit is not about temptation. It's actually about suffering. And those are two very different things. Think about temptation. It's a choice, right? Something tempts you, things in life tempt you, lying, cheating, gambling, drinking, addictions, pulling for terrible DC sports teams. I mean, all those things are temptations. Maybe someday we'll have a really good team here. But I do know that if you give in to those temptations, the suffering can happen, right? I mean, I understand that connection. But what we see here in the statement that we like to make many times and what we really read here from Paul, these are two different things. And so if we say God will never give you more than you can handle, what we're really saying is God will never give you more suffering than you can handle. And I know some of your stories. You've shared them with me before. And some of you have gone through some pretty hard suffering. Broken relationships where for decades you haven't communicated with your parents, or a child that has walked away from their relationship with you. Or maybe there's a health diagnosis that where the future for you is grim, or you've been praying for years to have a child and you still can't get pregnant. Some of you have lost everything. You've lost your business, you've gone into bankruptcy, you've lost a home, you've been homeless. And I've had conversations with some of you that you've lost loved ones to suicide, to accidents, and even things like murder. And so when someone comes to you and says to you, hey, God will never give you more than you can handle, you know what your response is? Well, blankety blank, that kind of God, right? Because this is not how this is supposed to work. This God is supposed to help me and be there for me because I can't handle this suffering that I am going through. And this is the point in our life where we start to ask this question, why God? Right? Why God? Why did you let my mom get cancer? Why did you let my best friend die in that accident? Why did you let our business go bankrupt? You ask that question and then you'll come to someone like me who's a pastor and you'll say, hey, Chad, why did God allow this to happen? I'm going to give the best answer I know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why your best friend committed suicide, or your dad left your family, or your daughter won't talk to you, why God didn't intervene, why God didn't do something. I don't know. And by the way, when you read the Bible, sometimes it actually doesn't satisfy us emotionally when it comes to dealing with suffering, when it comes to dealing with those tough times in our life. In fact, if we go back, like I said a little bit earlier, if we read Scripture, it's full of people that are really asking that question, why God? So how do we handle this? How do we move from this deep hurt that many of us have, this distrust maybe we have of God, into having a healthy relationship with God? I honestly believe it requires us to change our thinking. And the first thing is to understand that God didn't cause the suffering, okay? We live in a broken world. We live in a world that is full of sin, and suffering is here because of that. But we also need to realize that God actually feels our pain, that God is with us in that suffering. How do we know this? The book of John, which is, by the way, was written by another John, not the John in our story. We read about this guy named Lazarus. Lazarus had two siblings, Mary and Martha, and this family was actually really close to Jesus. When Jesus would go to Jerusalem, oftentimes he would go to Bethany where they lived, and he would stay with them. He would spend time with them, so he's super close with them. Well, Lazarus dies. Jesus finds out about this. He goes to Bethany to be with the family to see what's going on. When he gets there, there's this incredible miracle that takes place. Jesus actually raises Lazarus from the dead. But right before this miracle happens, right before that, we read two simple words that I think are a powerful statement about God. John chapter 11, verse 35, two simple words, Jesus wept. Now, there are a lot of theological questions about who is Jesus weeping for, but one of the most common views is that Jesus is weeping because Mary is weeping, his close friend. He's weeping because the crowds there are grieving. He's weeping because he feels pain, because he's lost one of his best friends to death. He's weeping because he feels the same hurt, the same pain, the same struggles as everyone else that's around him. He's weeping at the physical and emotional and the spiritual pain that he sees in the crowd and he feels in himself. N.T. Wright puts it this way. He says, the tears of Jesus are the tears of God. He is not distant from our sorrow. He is present in it. We've been programmed to think God causes suffering. Now, I'm going to blame two areas for this. One is Greek and Roman mythology. Because if you read that, the gods cause suffering in humans. But if you understand what's going on there, the gods are looking at humans as playthings. We're like toys. And so they're going to cause that suffering. I blame our thinking of God causing suffering because of that. But then the other thing I would blame are insurance companies, right? What happens when there's an earthquake, there's a tornado? What do we call these things? Acts of God. And so we're like, whoa. God caused this terrible thing to happen. Well, God must cause all the terrible things to happen in my life. So mythology and insurance companies are the reason I think some of us think God causes suffering. God does not cause suffering, okay? God is in the suffering with us. Philip Yancey said it this way, in Jesus we see the face of God, and that face is streaked with tears. God may not always change your situation, but he refuses to leave you alone in it. And so when someone comes to you and says, hey, God will never give you more than you can handle, be reminded that God didn't give you that suffering, but God is with you through it. And we can know that by seeing the tears of Jesus. And I think that tells us that God is with us. I don't tell you this morning as a talking head. I tell you this because I have felt burned by God in my own life. If you've been here a while, you've heard a story before. A lot of new people here, you may not have heard this, but about a year after Kara and I got married, Kara got pregnant, and as you can imagine, that's an exciting time for knowing a new child is coming. But some of you know, if you've had children, about the 4-month mark, you go in and they do some tests, right? And so Kara goes in, she has these tests that are done. The nurse there is like, hey, you're healthy, you're young, I think you're going to be fine. But if anything is wrong, the doctor's going to call you and we'll let you know. A little less than a week after this appointment, I'm in my office at the church I was working at in New Jersey, and Kara calls me. And she's weeping on the phone, and she said, hey, I need you to come home right now. Got in my car, got there as fast as I could, walked into our apartment, into the living room, and I can still vividly see that scene as I came around the corner. Kara's sitting on the couch, and she's just sobbing. And tears are streaming down her face. And she said, hey, Chad, the doctor called. And there's some issues with our unborn child. We had to go back in that week for more tests. And after those tests were done, the doctor talked to us and said, hey, I just got to let you guys know there's a myriad of health issues here. And I just want to let you guys know, too, that all of this is going to lead to the death of your daughter. It's like, hold up, God. We're young, we're healthy, we're Christians, right? This isn't supposed to happen to us. We're working in ministry. We're giving our lives to ministry. Why, God? On January 27th, 2001, At the University of Pennsylvania Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, our daughter, Kendall Grace, was stillborn. That was the moment for me that my theology stopped being theoretical and I had to put it into real practice. It became painfully real. Like, what did I believe? Did I believe all this stuff that I was telling other people? Could I live that out in my own life? Or was I going to give up too? Because I definitely felt burned by God. And again, I was asking that question. Why, God? God, why did you allow this to happen? Why did you not intervene? Why did you do this to us? I mean, I was an angry, bitter man for quite some time. And all these things that I said I believed, I had to figure out, do I actually believe this? And do I believe in this God? How did I get through feeling burned by God? I'll be honest, I'm not sure I'm necessarily fully there, even though it's been 25 years ago. I still struggle with it today. It's still hard for me to retell that story because of the pain that is there. But I hold on to some words from Peter in John chapter 6. Jesus has just fed the 5,000. He finishes his day. He's like, all right, you guys go home. He's going to go get a little R&R. And as he heads out for the day, the evening, the next day he gets up and the crowds are still there. And those crowds are around Jesus. And here's what Jesus says to them. He says, you're following me because you want me to feed you again. And I'm not going to do that. And if you read the story, it says Jesus refuses to give them food. And many of them turn around and they leave. But here's what Jesus says to his disciples that are with him. He asks them this question. He says, well, are you guys going to leave too? Peter, who's a little precocious, likes to live on the edge a little bit, responds with, I think, some very incredible words. He says this. He says, where else would we go? Where else would we go, Jesus? Jesus' disciples didn't fall away because of what Jesus didn't do. They realized Jesus was the answer to everything in their life that they had questions about. Where else would they go? For help, for comfort, for understanding, for peace, for hope, for love. Where else would they go? Well, they had figured this out. The only place that we could go to experience this is in this connection relationship with Jesus. And that's what made the difference for me. That in those questions of asking why God, when things didn't make sense, when I couldn't understand why God had allowed this to happen to Kara and I, that the only true answer to where else would I go was to fully follow Jesus. And by the way, again, it took months, maybe even a couple years to work through the anger and the bitterness and feeling of betrayal by God. But I kept coming back to that question, where else would I go but Jesus? Some of you here feel burned by God. Whether it's something from the past or something that you're experiencing right now, you feel left alone, like God doesn't care. Let me ask you that same question. Where else will you go? Because I promise you, if it's not Jesus, whatever you're doing to handle it right now is probably not working out well for you, okay? Where else will you go but to Jesus? And so let me share a couple of ideas here. There's other things you can do. These are things that I think could be helpful. Here's the first one I would share. It's kind of like last week. Share your frustrations with God. It's okay to be angry at God. If you read the Bible's full of people who get angry at God and are asking God why. Be honest with God. Be open with God. Be authentic with God. You didn't hear this. Maybe you share a few curse words with God, because I did. I'll be honest, I said things to God I've never said in my entire life because I didn't understand. I was so mad. I was so angry. I was so bitter. I didn't know what to do. But here's the deal. Understand that God is listening, right? Like last week I talked about, like God knows already. God realizes what's happening in your life, but God is present. God knows what you're going through. But God didn't cause the suffering that you're experiencing. God is in it with you. But it means you're going to have to let him heal you over time. And for me, I think those frustrations can be our prayer. Like, hey, God, this is what I'm frustrated with, and I'm going to share some things with you. This is going to be really difficult, but I'm going to say this. But maybe that's your prayer over and over again. But God, heal me. God, help me. God, comfort me. God, let me understand what that hope looks like through you. Share those frustrations with God. Second thing I would say is counseling is such an important thing. Get professional help, especially if it's something you just are having a hard time letting go of. I wish I could tell you that 25 years ago that I got professional help. It was not cool to get professional help 25 years ago. In fact, counseling wasn't really that big of a deal. It was looked down upon. Some of my counseling to deal with this has been in the last few years, right? Now, in a much better place, but counseling kind of helped me work through some of those hard things I wasn't quite sure of, that I was still working through in my own mind. We are pro-counseling here at The Journey. We love to get people connected with counseling. We work with C-Space and Safe Harbor for that. And so if you're at this place like, I really need to work through some stuff that's pretty hard, let us get you connected. You can scan the QR code in front of you. If you have our app, the counseling button is on there. You can click on that. Go through us to do that. Don't try to call them. It can get convoluted a little bit if you do that. But just go through us. We would love to get you connected. And by the way, like, we put money towards this. So you can't say, hey, I can't afford to do this. Last week, we set aside $15,000 from our Easter offering to put it aside. So money's never an issue. So if you need counseling, we would love to get you connected. Maybe that's the step that you need. Yeah, you need Jesus. Sometimes you need a professional to help ask you some questions, to help you walk through those hard times in life. And then my last thing is prayer. Our prayer team is going to be up here at the end of our service today. They'd love to pray over you. Maybe you're just like, I just need some encouragement through what I face. I need some encouragement to make sure that I am focused on Jesus through the hard things in life, through the suffering I'm going through. Man, our prayer team is up here, and they would love to pray over you this morning. There's many other things you could do here, okay? So many things. But here's what I'm going to leave with you today. God isn't always who we expect him to be, but God is always who we need, and God meets us in the sufferings of life. You want to know another way we know this? Oh, it's because of the cross. Think about that. God is standing there watching his son die on that cross. God knows suffering. But we also know that God knows hope because of the resurrection of Jesus. There's hope in our suffering. So this morning, ask yourself, where else will I go? And be reminded God is with you in the suffering in life. And the power of the resurrection should give us hope, even through those hard times that we may face.